Seven Blue Skies Channel presents Paranormal, Book 2, Part 3, Legend of the Caller, translated from the works of Dr. Ahmed Khalid Tawfiq. 6. Where is she? When I returned home at a late hour that night, my mother seemed worried as I looked disturbed and disheveled, and with red eyes from staying up late, my sister asked me what was happening, even making me swear nothing had happened to our brother Rida. I reassured them that I was just exhausted, nothing more. And in my humble room painted with cheap green paint, I sat smoking and flipping through my books which no one had touched since my teenage years. What a terrible defeat my diagnosis had received in less than 4 hours. The kid had escaped, answering the call of the caller, and now his family was surely swearing at that arrogant donkey, me, who claimed their son was rabid, thereby dropping their guard in dealing with the kid. Having it said that I know nothing doesn't bother me, as I have been told that a lot. I just hate for scientific facts to be defeated so cruelly at my expense. When Koch, the genius German physician, claimed that cholera is caused by bacteria, his colleagues challenged him in front of witnesses to stay at a big farm infested with the bacteria, enough to kill 100 men. Yet he did not get infected or even indigestion. And just like that, Koch's science triumphed for reasons they could not explain. Now, the same situation was happening to me, on a smaller scale. I know that the encephalitis which accompanies rabies causes temporary insanity, and that the patient may escape from his family, but this means they would find him dead somewhere in the village within 24 hours. But if they did not find him, who could convince them that what happened was unrelated to the caller? What a mess. In the morning, I went with red eyes and messy hair to check on my brother. Nagah opened the door, and as soon as she saw me, she smiled coldly and said smugly, "I heard that Abi Abdelrazik's son was called by the caller yesterday." Annoyed, I rebuked her, saying, "People say good morning first, you know." But she continued with her coyness, telling me, "You said they asked for your opinion, but you told them that a rabid animal bit him." "That's right." "So you were wrong," she said, "and that's just arrogant." Meeting her gaze directly, I clenched my teeth and grumbled, "Nagah, what exactly do you want? Why are you so pleased with this situation? Are you really happy to that extent with your brother-in-law's failure?" She went silent, not knowing what to say, and then looked at the ground and invited me in. "Forgive me," she said. "I spoke only out of my helplessness." She then hurried the children out of my way and continued, "You don't believe it, and that's why I said what I said. Forgive me." We went into my brother's room. Everything was the same, except for the thing I came here to do. She had already tied his wrists to the bedposts with a lace scarf, and he was asleep, open-mouthed, and seemed completely exhausted. Nagah explained, "He tossed and turned all night and kept getting up. That's why I had to tie him up. That damn thing called him repeatedly for 3 hours last night." I asked her, "And is Rida capable of untying himself?" "He's very weak," she answered, "or haven't you noticed? Plus, he is so confused that he can't manage to untie these knots." "And that other kid," I prompted, "Abi Abdelrazik's son. He was tied up but escaped?" "No," she said. "They had untied him, based on your advice, and left the room for 5 minutes to decide what they would do. And when they returned to the room, they found it empty, with the window standing open." Tears sprang to her eyes, and she whispered angrily, "And you said a rabid animal bit him." Dr. Assam said confidently, "Your scientific opinion is indisputable. The encephalitis compelled him to escape. But how will you convince those fools?" We were sitting in his exam room, and the stream of patients had subsided. His face in the morning light was even uglier than when I saw it the night before, like a doubtful old owl wearing a white coat. Considering, I told him, "I have an idea." "What's that?" "Just like me," I started, "you're interested in this myth." "Of course." Hitting the table with my fist, I exclaimed, "We need more cases and a lot of patients here." "I don't understand," he said. "You told me there was one patient who had not yet responded to the caller." "Yes," he said slowly. "And that his name is Rida Ismail." Why didn't I tell him that Rida is my brother? I don't know. It was an unknown instinct which made me do so. The same instinct which compelled me to not take my bags when I went to Dr. Richard Cummings' house in Yorkshire. And the same instinct which led me to spend the night in the dirty bar in that miserable Romanian village. And I had sworn long ago to always trust these mysterious instincts, because they were always right. I told him, "We have to get organized. We'll take shifts monitoring the neighborhood surrounding his home, and if this so-called caller appears, we will arrest her immediately." He regarded me for a second to see if I was serious, and then scratched his bald head, thinking, and said, "It's an exhausting plan." "Of course," I replied, "but I expect we won't have to wait more than 2 nights." "And who will be on call for any emergency cases in the night?" he asked. "You can tell a reliable employee where you'll be, so that he can call you as needed." He thought for a minute, and just then a pretty nurse entered the room carrying a small bottle containing a thermometer. And as soon as she saw me, she nodded in greeting and then turned to Dr. Awesome, saying in a breathy voice, "The last of the patients has gone, Awesome." Just Awesome? And seeing my look of surprise, Dr. Awesome's face reddened, and he motioned at the girl, saying, "Pardon me, I forgot to introduce her to you. Awatif, my wife." He smiled at her in reprimand and said, "Awatif, how many times have I told you not to call me by my first name in front of others?" Bringing her hand to her throat, she laughed coyly and said in a villager's accent, "I know Dr. Rifat well. He's a son of this village, not a stranger." I nodded at her in greeting, meaning, "Nice to meet you," and I asked her, "Do you know my family?" "Not exactly. I'm originally from Faus." What a weird thing. It never crossed my mind that the man was married. Judging by the state of his room I had seen the night before, and the direction of his life, I had assumed he was single. And where was his wife when I was here yesterday? Plus, I had some reservations about a marriage like this, one of inequality in social status. But it's none of my business. They're happy, and I understand what loneliness does to the human soul. At least he had completed his physiological existence. As for me, I'm still a child at play, throwing the occasional stone in the pond of life, but without the courage to swim therein. Dr. Awesome guessed half of my thoughts, saying, "Anyway, she's a good girl. She totally understands me, and I would not want anyone but her." He then continued, guessing the other half. "She had gone down to the village to deliver a child. You see, they prefer a midwife or a nurse for that job here." "So that's why I didn't see her last night," I said mildly. "And that's why I have closed the nurse's residence," he said, "because we live together in the doctor's quarters. My small room has become our luxurious home." Playing with the thermometer bottle, I asked, "So when should we start our little project?" "Tonight, if you want." It was the night. Once again, the mysterious black entity would come. I dressed accordingly in my small room, preparing to catch up with Dr. Awesome at the health unit. I wore my light sneakers, put a flashlight in my pocket, and made sure I had enough cigarettes for a long, cruel night. And then I did something I thought I would never do. From the false bottom of my bag, I pulled out my small gun which I had licensed after my incident with Count Dracula, and after ensuring it was fully loaded, I put it in my pocket. As for the second, more important step, I placed the small Quran my mother had given me in the inside pocket of my jacket. I had prepared for everything. 7. The encounter. At the health unit, standing like a ghost in the darkness, I met him. He was standing wearing a black turtleneck sweater. I disliked the thought of spending the night with this bald bat, but I could not avoid it, for 2 pair of eyes is certainly better than 1, even if both of us peered from behind thick prescription lenses. "Here I am," I called out, and he startled where he stood and started murmuring some protective prayers. What a fool you are. We haven't even begun. As soon as he recognized me, he shone the flashlight in my face and laughed nervously, saying, I thought you were her. Well, that's what we're after. Even so, he said, I'm happy you're not her. Dr. Awesome? Yes. My not being her does not give you the right to blind me with your flashlight. He apologized and turned off the flashlight, looking embarrassed. And we walked silently up the dusty road leading to my brother's house. He had described it to me meticulously that morning, but I feigned ignorance of it. And after a few minutes, the sound of our heavy breathing grew louder. Neither one of us was in good shape. I hated the eerie silence. In the distance, my brother's home appeared, sad, bleak, covered in blackness. I looked at him and whispered, aiming off to the west, You go into these fields and wait. And you? If anything suspicious happens, make an owl sound, I instructed. And if the danger is imminent, all you have to do is scream. And you? He asked again. I'll go into the inland cornfield. The inland field is the place where I heard the voice coming from, calling for my brother. I entered between corn stalks which were taller than me, with the rustling husks like knife blades scratching my face. It would be difficult to see anything in this place, even if it were a few centimeters from my face. I went farther in until I reached an empty space within the field, where I stopped, and my pulse raced with excitement. I looked at the sky and saw the stars shining more brightly and clearly than I had ever seen them before. In the distance, I could see my brother's home, lonely and miserable, covered by the night. There was no moon, and I preferred that, because it's not total darkness which is fearful. The truly scary thing is dim light casting shadows, because it stirs the imagination. And I thought of H.G. Wells' book, The Red Room, in which the protagonist of the story spends a black night in a haunted room, lighting loads of candles to keep him company in his loneliness, which only added to his fear. It almost drove him mad as he faced the shadows cast by the candles dying out one by one. So, yes, I definitely prefer total darkness. Total darkness harmonizes with the surface of things, but the lighting of a candle or a dim lamp, or even pale moonlight, is enough to make one die of fear. The moments passed. I sat on the ground cross-legged, and here I realized my main flaw, which I had never thought about and which has never left me: boredom. May this lazy caller be damned! Why must I spend an entire night waiting for the moment in which that cursed one would have mercy on my status and emerge from her hellish realm to scare me? If she wouldn't do it now, she needn't do it at all. 2 hours passed. The problem with these heinous creatures is that they never show up when you want them to. And now Rita sleeps peacefully in his bed, and Nagah sleeps next to him, pondering her fate after he is gone. And the whole village is sleeping blissfully, unaware of the two madmen who have decided to spend the night in the fields for no reason. I lit a cigarette and started humming. I don't know why I remembered that sad tune in this particular moment. Where is the boy, Mama? He answered the caller. This melody was appropriate to this situation, but it came harsh and thick from my mouth, like an omen, and it stirred a shiver in my veins. Why did I remember it? Just then, I began to sense that I was not alone. In my peripheral vision, I noticed something. I turned my head slowly towards that thing and noticed something resembling a tall girl wearing a long black dress, walking slowly and lightly about 5 meters away from me, seeming to float rather than walk. Under her dress, there was no sign of feet moving. He left the town when the ghoul called him out. She did not turn her face towards me, as if she hadn't seen me in the first place, and in this darkness, she wouldn't have seen me even if she looked at me directly. I felt my spine go rigid and my heart rising into my throat. She was looking in the direction of Rita's home. Where is the boy, kids? The boy has been charmed. What made me realize this whole thing was not an illusion was the aura of weird green light surrounding her. as if the light emanated from inside her, from under her dress. I was now seeing something strange and mysterious by any measurement, something I could not fathom, but I dared not leave this place before understanding what was happening. He followed her, traveling to some other place, and the years keep turning. Suddenly, the girl straightened her posture, reaching her full height, her chest moving up and down. And then she lifted her voice, calling like a wolf howling at the moon, "Rita! Rita!" The same prolonged wailing echo, like weeping coming from the bottom of hell. The same stretched syllables, the same breathiness I heard the night I returned from Cairo. "Rita! Rita!" It was time to end this charade. I stood up slowly and carefully, heading towards her. She had her back turned to me, the mysterious green light obscuring the silhouette of her body and falling on my own clothes. When I was directly behind her, I cleared my throat as my voice had gotten caught in my throat. "Where is the boy, Mama?" "He forgot his family." Trembling, I called out, "What are you doing here, girl?" And here, she turned to me. "He left the town when the ghoul called for him." Who said this collar was gorgeous? I had never seen or even imagined a face as horrible as this one, as pale as death, deep-set eyes staring, the pupils blood red, cracked lips. I cannot deny there is a special kind of beauty like that of witches, but it is a heinous and cruel beauty. Her black strands of hair braided carefully, her neck long and straight, and a big bluish mole on her left cheek. There was no time for my nerves to absorb all of this, because I screamed and screamed like never before in my life. I totally forgot about the gun in my pocket. I only wanted to get out of this situation, to go anywhere else where this face was not present. "Where is the boy, Mama?" "The boy has been charmed." I started running, stumbling and tripping, then getting up and running again, the cornstalks slapping my face, my heart pounding, my thinking entirely evaporated except for that ominous song. And 2 snakes, each eating the other's tail. I had no idea how my subconscious brought this image. From afar, her voice rose again, insistently repeating, "Rita! Rita!" In the darkness, I collided with a human body. I freaked out and started throwing dumb punches, trying to kill what I could only assume was her. Then I heard a familiar voice murmuring a plea to God and then shouting at me, "Dr. Riffat! It's me, Awesome." Awesome? Awesome who? Oh, now I remember. Dr. Awesome, with whom I began this mission. He turned on the flashlight and tried to calm me down as I relayed to him in quick, shaky words what had happened. "So then, she's here?" "Of course, you fool!" I shouted. "Well, let's go. It's our last chance." And we started running towards the place where I had seen her. And there, by the light of the flashlight, we found nothing except awful silence and the sound of a frog flirting with its female mate. Where did the girl go? "Are you sure about what you saw?" asked Awesome. "Of course." "Well, why didn't you catch her?" Though he could not see it in the dark, my face reddened, and I said with a mixture of embarrassment and frustration, "I wish it was you in my place. I had no chance to do anything." "Was it really such a horrible scene, to that extent?" he asked. "Truly awful," I said. "Well, where do you think she went?" I answered, "Back to where she came from, of course." He thought for a second and then yawned and said, "Well, anyway, it's impossible to find someone among this corn. It seems that tonight's party has ended. Let's go back to the health unit and discuss this. I think you need a strong cup of tea." "Definitely." "And now," he said, "let's recap." His wife, Awatif, stood making tea on the gas stove as Dr. Awesome and I sat shaking on the bed. I couldn't believe that just 10 minutes ago I had faced the caller. The caller. I started telling the story again as Awatif made doubtful sounds until I reached the point of the face-off. Here, she said in her breathy voice, "Oh my God, enough of this. I'm getting goosebumps." Dr. Awesome laughed cheerfully. Men love to scare women, and only smart women know how to use this fact. To me, it's as if women's fear of mice is only an ego stroke for men. Sipping on my tea, I said honestly, "You're getting goosebumps? Well, I faced this situation alone, and it will haunt me until my dying day." Interested, Dr. Awesome said, "Describe her to me." I rubbed my chin in hesitance. I knew exactly how she looked, but could not describe her. Then a notion came to me, so I grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and started drawing. "Ah," said Dr. Awesome, "you're going to draw her?" "Of course," I answered. "I can draw fairly well." And on the paper the face was born, the gazing eyes, the cracked lips, the soft black braids, then the long white neck. Not such a bad picture, but it didn't resemble her much, only useful to those who had never before seen a caller. I passed the paper to Awesome, who took it and regarded it with interest, and Awatif craned her neck, curious to see what it looked like. After gazing at the picture for a minute, Awesome returned it to me gloomily. I looked at the picture again. I had made a mistake. I had forgotten to shade the eyes to make them red like the caller's, and I also neglected to draw the bluish mole on the left cheek. That's why the picture seemed more human-like than that demon looked. Just another pretty girl. I folded the paper, placed it in my wallet, and stood up to leave. No one tried to stop me. Considering, Awesome asked, "And are we going to continue what we started?" "Of course," I said. "We have nothing, and now it's 11 p.m. "If I was in your shoes, I'd be careful," Awesome advised. "And why's that?" From behind his thick glasses, he gave me a strange, kind look and whispered, "You have delayed her project for tonight, and the caller never leaves whoever stands in her way. But have another cup of tea before you leave." 8. The Call. I returned home at 1 a.m., undressed, and threw myself on the bed, exhausted. What a long day. The headache was killing me and dizziness taking over. I felt totally separated from my own existence. But 1 a.m.? I had said goodbye to Awesome 2 hours before. Did I really take 2 hours to reach home? I couldn't remember a thing and did not care to remember. All I wanted now was to sleep. I fell into a beginningless sleep and woke at an early hour the next day, my mouth dry like hay, and in my head, one persistent image of a snake eating the tail of another snake. Where had I seen that? And when? And what does that mean? But my questioning ended quickly as I fell asleep again. I sat at the low table eating the egg and mince pie my sister Raifa made for me. I was distracted to the point of causing her worry. She opened several topics, which seemed to me really unnecessary and tacky, so I stopped listening and murmured lame responses as if agreeing with her opinion. Hmm. Mm. 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 Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm. And here I noticed her looking at me, surprised and upset, saying, "I'm asking you." I had answered her question with humming, trying to give the impression of following what she was saying. So my absent-mindedness was exposed, embarrassing and upsetting her. In confusion, I told her, "Forgive me, what were you saying?" "You're not listening to me," she cried. "I was asking what you're going to do about Rita." "Well," I replied, "is there anything new?" "Yes, his wife sent for us this morning, saying that he—" "Escaped?" I interjected. "No," she answered, "not yet. The caller called him last night, and he broke the restraints and almost escaped, to the point that she had to ask the neighbors to help prevent him. She didn't want them to know." "She didn't want them to know? That's strange. And she hasn't told anyone about this until now?" I asked. "Of course. You know our brother's wife. She doesn't like people's gloating. She hid the secret and claimed to her neighbors and friends that he is sick. I considered. So I'm the first one to examine him? Of course, she replied. And I was telling you, something in this talk is very important. It means, but, my mind is so confused. I can't make anything from this talk, but it implies something very important, and I've forgotten what it is. My sister's lips still moved with much talk. Won't you ever stop talking? I'm not getting a single thing of what you're saying, or even hearing it for that matter. And now, I must visit Rita and check on him and that strong, secretive woman of his. I finished my breakfast and downed my tea. Then I left home, heading to Rita's place. I made a point to cross through the cornfield where the events took place the night before, and in the spot where the caller had stood, I stopped and checked the ground. There were footprints from the sneakers I had worn, and a few meters away, other strange prints, clear and deep depressions in the dusty ground, impossible to have been made by shoes. To be precise, they resembled a cat's paw prints made as it stalks a bird. I made my way to Rita's house and knocked at the door. Nagah opened to me. As soon as she saw me standing there, she cried, "You have no idea what happened last night while you slept sweetly." I stopped her quickly, lifting my hand firmly, saying, "I do know, and I wasn't sleeping sweetly. May God forgive you." "Well then, where were you?" "I was standing out in the cold, awaiting your caller, and I have seen her, and heard her calling for him." "And what did you do?" she asked. "Nothing," I replied. "I went to get help, and when I returned, I didn't find her." She said. "What a failure. This woman is getting on my last nerve. And why do I take her rudeness instead of smashing her head? Unfortunately, I have to, because she is the tax I pay and will keep paying whenever I want to enter my brother's world. She is the lady of the house, and there's no avoiding that." I contemplated her face, her soft black braids, her staring eyes. These features remind me of something. Plus, her lips are unusually dry and cracked, her neck long and white. I don't want to press the subject, but this woman rather resembles the caller. And also, don't forget, as this is important, the strange bluish mole on her left cheek. It resembles the caller's, but it's not it. It can't be. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. I swallowed hard. It might be a coincidence, and it might be the effect left in my soul from last night's events, and it might be a reflection of my hatred of her, but I can't for 1 second imagine the reason or motive compelling her to leave her husband and go outside at night to call for him. It would be silly and redundant if every strong-willed woman I meet has a fierce and evil character. Ekaterina disguises herself as a werewolf in Romania, and Nagah disguises herself as the caller in Egypt. No, this remark won't affect my thinking. Let me just keep this point in my memory, never to forget it. Nagah looks somewhat like the caller. Maybe that will be a useful clue for me some day. I told her goodbye and headed back towards my home. But first I went to the health unit to check something at the birth registry, and I returned home without seeing Awesome. The patients again streamed into our home, and I sat practicing my trade in that side room. I was totally distracted, which affected my efficiency in examining the patients. More than once I hesitated, pen in hand, trying to remember the name of a medication. I had forgotten a lot of the faces I saw the day before. Basically, my performance was really pitiful. In the late afternoon, I went up to my room and ate a bit of lunch my mother had prepared. I then stretched out in bed to rest in preparation for the harsh night ahead, and was quickly overtaken by a calm, dreamless sleep. I awoke in total darkness. What time is it now? Looking at my phosphoric watch, I found its hands pointing at 10 p.m. My fatigue had taken over, and now I'm 2 hours late for my appointment with Dr. Awesome at the health unit. I have to get dressed and hurry to him before he goes mad. I grabbed the collar kit which I've described to you, the gun, the Quran, cigarettes, my sneakers, and I headed for the bedroom door to leave. But here I heard a strange voice, a voice coming from the irrigation pump near our home, a long, wailing voice, a voice I knew well, calling, "Rifat! Rifat!" She's calling me? Me specifically? She's come for me? And now I won't look for her, and there won't be any more boring nightly waiting. All I have to do is go out of the house, and she'll be right there waiting for me. Rifat! Here the door opened, and I noticed my mother, my sister, and Talat, Raifa's husband, entering the room, a candle lit in my mom's hand, and a terrified look in her withered eyes. She murmured a quiet prayer and then said, "She's calling you, son." She noticed I was prepared to go out and cried, "No, no, you're not going." In spite of myself, I said harshly, "Listen, Mom, no one can interfere in this. It's my problem, and I'll fix it myself." She pounded on her chest in desperation, shouting, "Help me, kids! Am I going to lose both of my sons?" The voice echoed, cold and insistent, "Rifat!" I went for the door. There is something irresistible in this call. The scene of her face. I have to see that face one more time. How fascinating it is. How strange. And how interesting. They won't be able to prevent me, even by the claim of family care. Grabbing my arm, his grip like locking pliers, Talat said roughly, "Rifat, I don't want to hurt you." Trying to free my arm, I said angrily as my glasses fell to the floor, "This is none of your business, Talat. Leave me alone." His grip tightened, and here the voice echoed again, "Rifat!" No, I won't lose this opportunity. I tried furiously to struggle loose, which only gave Talat a chance to demonstrate his power. I only remember a violent battle in which I was the weaker party. My mother cried out, and my sister clapped her cheeks as her son clung crying to the bottom of her dress. Talat threw some punches and then tossed me onto the old wooden bed. My sister handed him a woven rope, which he tied around my ankles, breathing hard, and then around my wrists. I resisted and screamed. My skin abraded, but the rope was too tight. Finally, I gave up, exhausted. The voice still called out, "Rifat!" My sister cursed and then shouted, "Shut up, you—" And while crying, her voice sweet to the soul, she exclaimed, "First Rida, and now my brother Rifat, the best of men. I wish you never came from Cairo. I wish you never came. I wish you had left us in our misery." Why is this woman crying? I see nothing disastrous happening here. It's just that this rope is annoying me, and I'm going to break free as soon as I can. My beloved stands outside in her black dress, waiting and calling for me. So why not respond to her call? For the following few days I had no idea what had happened. Constant hallucinations mixed with images of Dr. Richard and Esteban, the werewolf, and Dracula's mummy, the scene of Katerina's death, Dr. Awesome, and the face of the caller, and Judith's face, and snakes eating each other's tail. Afterwards, Raifa told me everything. I was incoherent, staring at the world with unseeing eyes. I ate nothing, but they force-fed me like ducks. My mother burned much incense near my bed and read Surah Yasin hundreds of times. As for Raifa, she brought a charlatan, as usual a con man, to try to lift the curse binding me. And of course he burnt more incense and read dozens of protective spells over me, asking for multiple things and then leaving, claiming an angry genie was upset with me because I failed to bring the gifts he demanded. Talat was more practical in his thinking. He went into the village and brought Asim, the village doctor, to see me, and the latter showed his remorse and sadness, claiming he had guessed this would happen when I was late for our appointment. He told them the story of my encounter with the caller. He then gave me a sedative injection and offered his services at any time, advising them to untie me occasionally and to allow me to flip in bed to avoid bed sores. He took £1 as his price for the house call, though that was forbidden according to union laws. What a fraud. My sister later told me that every night the caller would call me from the direction of the irrigation pump, and I would fidget and turn and try to get up, but my restraints proved stronger than me. At one point, Talat insisted on going out to see this demon, but my mother and sister begged him not to go, for they were not ready to lose the last man in the family. And my sister kissed her husband's hands to dispel his deadly curiosity, and he obliged her wish. How long did I remain in this state? 2 weeks. And how would it end? That is a story I will tell you, but don't rush me. End of part 3.